Bruce Banner isn't the only big, green, indestructible human in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as there's also the She-Hulk. And while Bruce has feelings for a woman, Natasha Romanoff, depicted in the Avengers movies and now a character in the She-Hulk, has had a queer moment. However, this queer moment isn't really a moment. Keep watching this video to find out what that queer moment is, plus other related She-Hulk news. What is the Marvel queer moment about? Marvel has teased queer representation in their productions on several occasions. However, more often than not, these representations have been half-baked. In 2017, Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn teased a few invisible queer characters in the MCU. Fast forward to 2019, and Marvel revealed its first LGBTQ character in the form of Joe Russo's tokenistic Avengers Endgame cameo. Going forward, this half-baked attitude has become too familiar in almost all Marvel productions, from Black Panther to Thor Ragnarok. Speaking of Thor, Love and Thunder was expected to make up for their lack of serious queer content with Valkyrie's gay storyline, but unfortunately that also ended with something as unsatisfying as a kiss on the back of a woman's hand. Now, Marvel has offered fans one more queer moment, and this time it was in the 4th episode of the She-Hulk series. So what was this moment, and how did it play out in the series? Also, what does this mean for the MCU going forward? Why is there a lack of LGBTQ representation in MCU? This is 2022, and LGBTQ MCU fans want to know why there is a lack of queer content in their works. MCU apologists will be quick to mention Phastos' role in Eternals and America Chavez's debut in Doctor Strange 2 as examples of queer content in the MCU. And while it's true that both instances are important strides, they are equally sidelined by the narrative in ways that most heterosexual relationships aren't. Stack that up with Disney's nonchalant approach to Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, and you will agree that Marvel hardly deserves any praise in this regard. However, considering the fact that the MCU has reached a new age and that they've spread their wings to TV, fans would expect that there be more freedom to represent queers on the small screen. Why not? After all, the excuse of being hounded by international censor boards will no longer exist at that level. Well, fans would be wrong as well. This is because Marvel's TV slate is still lacking as far as queer representation is concerned. Even with the surprise reveal in this past week's episode of The She-Hulk, the show is still reminiscent of what the other MCU shows and films have been doing, as far as LGBTQ representation is concerned anyway. What was She-Hulk's queer moment? If you haven't seen the 4th episode of The She-Hulk, then you probably missed this. The queer moment on the show takes place during a conversation between Jennifer and her best friend Nikki. Here, the two of them share their thoughts about online dating, which the She-Hulk still struggles with. However, Nikki, who we don't really know much about, says the 4 words that represent the only queer moment in the series so far. These words are, "Hetero life is grim." Hold on a second. Could this mean Nikki isn't hetero? We already know that hetero life is grim. That's no breaking news. However, only a queer observer would have the guts and spine to say those words out loud. In an interview, Ginger Gonzaga, who plays the character Nikki, confirmed that her character is indeed queer. She also revealed specifically that Nikki is bisexual. Gonzaga said, and I quote, "Nikki lives a very free life." Ginger continued, "I live a very free-loving life, and so it was something that was also really important to me and Titania. It's very exciting for me, and I love Nikki's freedom in all areas. She's free with her words, she's free with her love, and just very limitless, so it makes me really happy." So with confirmation that Nikki's queer, fans will have to wait and see just how much of her nature will be explored in the MCU going forward. And for the sake of proper queer representation, many fans are hoping that MCU turns it up a notch as the She-Hulk series progresses. What else do we know about Nikki? Episode 4 of She-Hulk doesn't give away too much information about Nikki. That one line is really all that fans have to hold on to, at least until more interesting information about her is uncovered. Sadly, Ginger Gonzaga didn't offer fans much hope of seeing or knowing more about Nikki anytime soon. In fact, she sounded like the hetero life is grim scene almost didn't make it to the final cut. Ginger Gonzaga said, and I quote, "I think there was a point, I think there was a time, just for the way the cameras work. I think that line was cut, so we got worried because I wanted to be part of Nikki's story. That's who she was, and that's what I was doing." The good news is, Gonzaga never said that the hetero life is grim scene almost didn't make the cut because of its queer nature. However, cutting off the scene for any other reason would mean that Marvel still doesn't understand the line's significance to the queer community, and that they are still unwilling to improve on their track record. Why are those 4 words a big deal? Even though the words "hetero life is grim" doesn't do much to satisfy satisfy a proper LGBTQ story, it still has some importance, simply for the fact that it's there. Because without it, the queer representation in the She-Hulk series would have been zero to date. Also, the fact that Gonzaga had to be questioned about it to confirm Nikki's status also shows how important the line is. Yes, it's just a one-liner, but as the saying goes, half a loaf is better than none. This is not to say Marvel should give themselves a pat on the back for just one line. Rather, the sort of attention the line gathered proved beyond reasonable doubt that the topic and its proper representation means a lot to the fans. During Gonzaga's interview, she was quick to mention that having more queer representation in the MCU is definitely overdue. We're not too sure if we'll get more of that in this season of the She-Hulk, as it has already been produced, edited, and released. But fans will hope that Marvel takes note of this and makes real efforts to represent queerness in both their characters and their storylines. Little drops of water make the ocean, so fans can be hopeful that the little queer representations in the MCU will blossom into something more significant one day. Would the queer line be a waste? Now that the four-word line has gone viral, the question is if it's just a flash in the pan, or will it have any significance going forward? For now, what we know for sure is that the line has raised some eyebrows, and that's a good thing. However, if Nikki isn't able to significantly express her bisexuality later on the show, then saying those words would have been a waste of time. Also, it will be cruel to fans, as the breadcrumb trails only lead to a dead end. While there is something to be said for organically incorporating queerness without making a hassle of it, this specific kind of representation is just tokenistic when there isn't any significant LGBTQ representation to balance it out. Even Jessica Jones, a show that started back in 2015, was a lot more progressive than this. It might not have had the word bisexual in the dialogue, but it was incredibly clear that Jessica was into both men and women. In other news, metal-clawed X-Man may become a mainstay in the MCU. Wolverine fans will be happy to hear that the metal-clawed X-Man has popped up on an episode of She-Hulk and might even become a mainstay in the MCU. It all started in episode 2 when She-Hulk lost her job, thanks to the perception that her green skin gives her an unfair advantage with the jury. This forced her to search for work online, and while she was at it, she came across several references to the Avengers, Norse mythology, and even the Ant-Man. But there was one story that struck the right chord. The headline of the story read, "Man fights with metal claws in bar brawl." We don't need a prophet to tell us that the man being talked about in the article is none other than Wolverine. It actually makes sense that Wolverine and the She-Hulk can exist in the same timeline. This is because Wolverine's healing power would make him almost death-proof. Well, except in the film Logan. Other than that, his abilities can keep him alive long enough to run through all the MCU characters during their timeline. Let's see how he fits in the She-Hulk story. That's if he indeed makes an appearance on the show. So guys, what do you think about the She-Hulk queer moment? And how do you feel queerness can be better represented in the MCU? Tell us in the comments section. I'd be glad if you liked and shared this video. And if you have an extra few seconds, punch the subscription and notification buttons to watch more interesting videos like this. Thank you for watching.